So my name is Sierra White. Stage name is also Sierra White. Went to college and graduated with a musical theater, BFA, musical theater performance. But currently, I make my living as a full-time equity actor, as well as a cabaret artist and vintage entertainer. Graduating from high school, I went into college majoring in commercial advertising. It was something that I thought would be creative and would make some money. With that though, because I always loved theater and it was, president of the drama club in high school and very much a theater kid, I had a musical theater minor. And so about the first week in, I went into a meeting with my counselor for drama. She was a professor at the school. And she sat me down and said, "Why do you, an advertising major, want to minor in musical theater performance?" And I just talked about how much I loved and how much I had a passion for performing, and not just performing, every facet of it, of costume design and lighting and sound. And she said, "No, I think you might be a musical theater major. You have a little bit more time to audition for a scholarship." And I called my mom and basically was very scared and was like, "Mom, I think I'm going to switch and be an arts major full time." I got my equity card very early. I got my equity card just a smidge over a year out of college. I was 22, like fresh 22, and the other three women in the show were all older in their 30s, very much established, very much people who had worked before, and equity artists. And I was already halfway through rehearsals when I decided to try to be cute and say, "Thank you for being equity so I can have equity points." It was very silly and very cringeworthy. But I'll never forget one of the actresses, Dana, looked at me and said, "Why are you thanking us? You're equity too." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm EMC." And she said, "This theater requires 5 equity contracts per show. It's a 4-woman show." And luckily it worked out. I called professors and people I knew and they said, "Once again, you can handle it. It's always great to have a good support system and people you trust that you can go to." So I worked consistently for the next 4 years. Even though I was very young, I happened to have a much older energy about me. So I played a lot of moms, a lot of teachers, a lot of nuns. And after a while, things started to slow down. I found that my age and my type for traditional theater wasn't lining up. I wanted something that was still creative, and that's how I found parties and entertainment. I fell in with a group called the Chicago Cabaret Project. They were looking for a singer who had musical theater experience and some sort of repertoire, a book. From there, I started making contacts with people who do nightlife and lounge singing. And since I already had, once again, an established book of jazz standards, and now I was starting to get a knowledge of how to work with an accompanist in a party entertainment setting instead of an audition setting, or work with a band, that opened doors for me to start working at bars and clubs. And then I kind of fell in love with cabaret. I kept working in theater and kept doing cabaret nightlife as my day job. But I established a really great relationship with the theater called the Rouse Center for the Performing Arts. And in 2019, they approached me after I did a production of Freaky Friday with them. And they asked me if I would write a full 90-minute cabaret one-person show, and they would produce it. They said they would mount it. And it was a 3-show development deal, so they would build it. And that was my first huge breakout moment as a cabaret artist. So ever since then, that's been how I've been really making a living, is writing these really personal, intimate shows for an audience of maybe 50 to 200 people, and just making a lot of friends and making a lot of music. I was deciding that I wanted to be full-time, either nightlife entertainer or an actor. And leaving the more stable day jobs is a really big decision, but I just knew I wasn't happy and I wanted to be creating full time. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And someone popped into my Facebook DMs and said, "Hi, You don't know me, I'm a friend of a friend. And it was someone in the theater community I'd worked with. And they said, I am the new variety entertainment manager for a bar that is under construction, is opening up. It's a vintage bar, and we're going to have a speakeasy room. So there's multiple dining rooms. And in one of the speakeasies, we have hidden stages for surprise vintage entertainment. And we're looking for a singer who has experience with that, and who is talented and has a good reputation. And I got your name. And I said, oh, well, I'm so excited. I'm absolutely open and interested in talking about this. Do you mind telling me who passed my information along? And they ended up telling me the most unexpected person. His name is Kyle, and we worked together on a very small project 2 years prior. When I say very small, it was a one night only event where we were hired as singers, and we had 1.5 rehearsals. So I had spent maybe 6 hours with him, but he was so sweet and he had such a lovely conversation. And we just really admired each other as singers and artists. And he thought enough of me to recommend me for this incredible job just, years later. You never know who's watching, who's remembering you. You never know what that conversation when you're on 5, like by the water cooler, is gonna do. So when I'm doing a more structured theatrical show that has a script and a score that is, part of the union or something that belongs to a theater, I really feel like the challenge for me and my job as an artist is to kind of be clay and allow myself to be molded and allow myself to let the director and the other artists in the room kind of mold me and work with them. Whereas I look at writing cabarets and crafting vintage performances as more of a puzzle, as something, I become the sculptor in a way.
For kids who might be interested in cabaret performance, right? Physical. Mm-hmm. What would be advice you have or resources you might have for those students to look, delve deeper, learn more, be inspired?
So I would say do your research and don't just stop at, 1965. Go really, really far back. Go back and look at the vaudeville era. They do have those grainy historical recordings of, our artist ancestors doing the tap dance numbers and like the straw hats. Like really listen to that old stuff back then. And honestly, the only difference with vintage entertaining is having my research of garments, knowing which eras you like, and then really just diving deep into those eras and looking at the style. As our technology with entertainment evolved and changed, so did our mannerisms as entertainers. How we told the story changed. And you'll find that little things like that, the way you gesture with your hands, the way you look with your eyes, that can change the entire story, and it can tell everybody the entire time you're in, the timeline you're in. I always thought it was surprising that no one really talked about it in high school or in college, especially because the further you go in your theatrical education, the more you'll be required to do juries, or you'll be required to do recitals, or, small black box shows. And those are basically offshoots of a cabaret. Those are really, really close, especially your recitals. I had to do a senior recital and was terrified. And I remember backstage telling my accompanist, I never want to do this again, because I didn't want to do a show by myself and I didn't want to have to talk about myself. And now it's what I do for a living. But I really wish I had invested more time and concentration into those events, because we got so few of them and they're just so beautiful.
What would you, looking back, 17, 18-year-old self, what would you want to tell yourself?
I think my mom's incredibly smart woman. When I first got my card and I finished those contracts, I said, what am I going to do? And everybody said, you have to go to New York now. And so I thought about it and I told my mom, and she said, okay, you don't have to stay there. You have time. I think we always forget that we have a little bit of time, especially when we're young. So I went and couch surfed for a little while and told myself 3 months to feel it out, and hated it. And I'm so glad that I didn't, just pack up everything and moved and then end up stuck or planted. That somebody reminded me I have time. So don't be afraid to try things out. I would also say, don't be afraid to be flexible. I did not graduate school thinking that I would be a vintage entertainer or a cabaret artist or be writing my own shows. And I just let the winds take me, and I looked for the right opportunities and said no where I needed to say no, which is something we also don't get told. We're often told as artists that we have to take everything, and that's not true. If something doesn't feel right in your gut or your heart, it's okay to say I'm going to pass for now. So that's it. I would just say be flexible, and you have time. Lives are meant to be lived. They're not meant to be compared.